Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Myth. So, Ryujinx series on the entire Nintendo Switch emulation saga, because as of this morning, Suyu, a fork of Yuzu, which we already know is dead, buried, and dusted, has also ceased development. I want you to understand that this is not because Nintendo went after them, at least that we know publicly, but for a very different reason that I will explain throughout the video. But we are now down another Nintendo Switch emulator, so the saga of the story continues. Before I get too far involved though, if you need a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. But so far, both Yuzu and Suyu are no longer in active development. Obviously the Yuzu team settled with Nintendo for $2.4 million, and that is completely done. What Suyu was a pivot on that project, using the source code and doing things differently than Yuzu did, hopefully to avoid Nintendo's gaze and keep them out of some legal trouble. Now last night I did get a message saying that the Suyu Discord server had been shut down or deleted. I checked into the background and then it was offline, so I kind of expected something to happen, but it wasn't enough for me to actually talk about in a video, so I was waiting to see what would happen in the future. Now as of this morning, we know exactly what that is. One of the developers of Suyu made a statement and put it online, basically saying that this project is no longer, and they cite one very specific reason, and one reason that would be near impossible to actually solve. But they basically just go through the rudimentary, hi guys, we're not doing this anymore. They say a couple of things negative about other team members. I don't really deal with that sort of stuff on the channel, the internal drama. What I did hear previously that I could not verify from multiple parties is that somebody on the Yuzu team had a Nintendo Switch SDK and development system, and they were using information gleaned from that to help them write the emulator, which would be a complete non-clean room design. So that everyone better understands this, I will explain it as follows. Suyu was a fork. That means it's taking the source code from Yuzu, pivoting it to its own repro as a fork, and then continuing development, but it is based on the Yuzu source code. What that means is Yuzu was the main source of information, code and otherwise, for this Nintendo Switch emulator. Anything that Suyu did was based upon the work that Yuzu had started as the main. Yuzu's code was iffy. I put iffy in quotation marks because I don't know exactly what is in the code that would not be permissible. I just know that it is there. And that's what the developers of Suyu are going to reference in just a moment. But just to preface it, they say that Suyu is no longer a thing. They are not actively developing it, and it is not going to continue. And the reason for that is within the Yuzu code that Suyu would have used when they forked it, there was information from the Switch SDK. And if you're not aware, SDK stands for Software Development Kit. That is both the hardware as well as the software and accompanying documents from Nintendo or any other console manufacturer that helps the developer actually develop the game for the target hardware. This is protected material. You cannot use this within any sort of emulation system. Now, to give you an idea of a SDK, this is for the 3DO M2, a very antiquated piece of hardware that never actually came out. And I do have the source code for the entire SDK as well as a lot of the accompanying documents. Now, if I wanted to build a 3DO M2 emulator, I don't have the talent unfortunately, but if I did, technically I could not use any of this code whatsoever, and that is because it's proprietary Nintendo technology and information. Developers have to sign NDAs and other documents stating that what they learned from Nintendo, what they're shown by Nintendo, and the tools they use that Nintendo developed are protected, and you can't just start using that to make an emulation platform for any sort of Nintendo technology whatsoever. So it seems like the rumors I had been hearing from multiple parties are true. Somebody on the Yuzu side of things, and maybe elsewhere, had access to proprietary Nintendo information, software development kits, and even development hardware, and used information gleaned from that to write some of the emulation code. And again, just 3DO M2 code because I can show it on screen. And all of this, the SDK, the tool chain, all of the hardware is just so that you can develop games for the Nintendo Switch. But none of this information can be in any way, shape, or form used to develop a software emulator because you're stepping on Nintendo's copyright, IP, and otherwise right now. And that's why in a previous video I talked about clean room design and why it is so important. This is reverse engineering something without any prior information on how it works that would be considered insider information, in this instance an SDK. If you can completely reverse engineer the Nintendo Nintendo Switch SDK without ever seeing it, that is perfectly permissible for the most part. Now, there are some weird situations in which there could still be some stickiness to it, but you definitely want to clean room design all of this, and what the Suyu developers are saying is that Yuzu never did that whatsoever, because it seems like the Yuzu team had something from the SDK within the actual code, and it's very hard to excise that once it's done. If you take a look at finished video games, a lot of times they have appendage code and other assets that are never used in-game that need to be there for some sort of dependency. So for Suyu to remove this would probably be an impossible task, but what it does do if they continue to use it and develop it for it is put a giant target on their back, because everybody knows Nintendo is currently going after this sort of stuff. Any crack in the door that they can see, they are going to Kool-Aid Man through and try to stop it. So basically all of the Yuzu code is poisoned in some way, shape, or form, and any fork that relies on it is going to be in a very hard situation, because honestly, like I just previously said, trying to pull this code is going to be very difficult. If you don't have access to the SDK and the rest of the documentation from Nintendo, you might not even know what piece of code it is you need to pull. Only the person that wrote it and understands where the origin of it came from would be able to go back in and actually remove it. But even once you remove it, it's going to break a lot of things. Honestly, the amount of work to do something like this kind of prohibits people from actually probably moving forward too much without that legal risk. Now, of course, you can continue to move forward with it, but that's just kind of how it works. And if you take a look at Reddit here as well, other developers are saying that this project is done. And I think this is honestly, as disappointing as it is, a very intelligent and understandable situation to be in and a decision to be made. Nobody on the Suyu team wants to have a lawsuit with Nintendo, and even though they did all the right things, the fork that they've coded from, Yuzu, is just not up to the task of being able to avoid Nintendo's lawyer's gaze. And there's other situations as well. Sudachi's also got their Discord server shut down, but at least at this point in time, their GitHub is still active, and it does still seem to be in active development. But honestly, this story is changing basically every single hour, so it's likely that something happens in the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll have to kind of wait and see. And of course, Ryujinx is still up, but there's something very specific about Ryujinx that doesn't have anything to do with Suyu or Yuzu. It is written from scratch, it has nothing to do with the Yuzu source code, and it's very likely, almost incredibly possible, that they have not touched the SDK and they've written this entire thing from scratch as they state. Their Discord server is still up as well, and that is why when you code these sort of projects, it is imperative to stay away from anything in the SDK, any prior knowledge, or using any information that would be considered copywritten or under IP protection from the hardware makers. If you're going to write an emulator, you need to do it from start to finish without utilizing any of that knowledge, or else you basically screw yourself from get-go. Now, I'm not saying that the Yuzu team did everything wrong, and I'm not saying they did everything perfect. I'm just saying that if you have the source code for a piece of hardware or its software development kit and you want to write an emulator, you better hope it's as old as the 3DOM2 and absolutely nobody cares, because otherwise you are opening yourself up to a very big issue. And even though Suyu was non-profit, that was good and that was smart. It doesn't matter if the codebase contains proprietary Nintendo information or code, because they know that Nintendo is out for blood. Suyu is trying to avoid getting sued, and now knowing that that code is in there, the Suyu developers understand that they've got a target on their back. They're looking at their bank accounts, they're looking over their shoulder, and they're thinking, is this really a fight we want to pick with Nintendo? And any intelligent person, any half-intelligent person, any quarter-intelligent person would say, there's no way in hell I want to take my chances against the juggernaut that is Big N. And I'm not saying these people are quarter-intelligent, I'm sure they're 100% intelligent, it's just a way to speak. And that is why, as of today, Suyu's active development is over. Honestly, Ryujinx seems to be the path forward, but you never know what Nintendo's going to do next, and as the story evolves, I will make more videos in it, because I love talking about this stuff, and from the feedback I get and the views, it seems like you guys really like watching it too. But Yuzu is dead, Suyu is gone, and we still have Ryujinx, and we'll have to see what next week brings, because this keeps changing basically every week. Short of that, I'll see you guys next time, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.